We're back for another Full Build Friday to finish off your week. This time around, I have an old but gold character for your consideration, and one that you all voted on to be rebuilt. You can vote on the next rebuild over on the posts, but for now, we're back with the rockin' and a rollin' rabble-rouser from League, Rammus the Armordillo.
Yeah, okay.
Now, this is a character that we have built before, and whose video you can even find on the channel. I went through the build goals when I did Onslaught, another recent rebuild, but nothing's really changed about Rammus since I last built him. So I'm going to throw my goals on screen here, and give you the summary of them before we just dive right into it. Our admirable Armadillo has a heavy focus on disrupting enemies, whether that be knocking them around with Powerball, slowing them down with the aftershocks of Soaring Slam, or even forcing them to attack him with his frenzying taunt. He takes further advantage of that particular ability with his defensive ball curl damaging enemies that hit him, which will admittedly be difficult to translate into a consistent effect within Pathfinder. However, with that in mind, we're sticking with the Shisk as his ancestry and using the Quillcoat heritage to gain the Barbed Quill's reaction, giving him that method of hurting those that hurt him. The unfortunate aspect of this is that it can only be used once per day, but I suppose it's better than none per day. He then grabs Spine Stabber since Rammus rolls around unarmed, and this will give him an unarmed attack to make use of that. As a Shisk, he gets an innate boost to Intelligence and then takes his free boost to Strength. We are once again using the Tall Tale background, based on the mythic status he has achieved within Shurima. This provides him with training and performance, which is as questionable as his impressive performance skill feat. Nevertheless, he's got them, and he's got ability boost going to his Strength and Constitution. Now for his starting ABCs here, that just leaves us with his class. To I'm sure nobody's surprise, we will be sticking with the Guardian class, but with its full, proper release, as it has undergone some changes. It is still a strength-based defense-heavy class, but it no longer has those subclasses, those threat techniques to it. Guardians still get shield block, but just about everything else has been tweaked a little bit. From Guardian's armor to intercept attack to taunt. All familiar concepts with a fresh coat of paint. One new feature is Ever Ready, ensuring that he's always got a reaction to start off with, though this is limited to Guardian reactions. For our class feat, Punishing Shove replaces Unkind Shove and has been buffed slightly, featuring extra damage as his proficiency with athletics increases. This will provide him with a solid means of thumping somebody when he shoves them in the spirit of his Powerball. Speaking of pushing you around, Guardian gets training in athletics right off the bat, and Rammus here will take further training in acrobatics, diplomacy, nature, and survival. For his ability boost, I'd go a little physical with the likes of strength, dexterity, constitution, and then wisdom. Strength will be his primary combat stat, but constitution will be handy simply to enhance his survivability, especially when he gets enemies to start attacking him instead of his allies. The formerly used armor break is no longer available at 2nd level, so we'll instead start with Hampering Stance, allowing him to enter a stance that turns the area around him into difficult terrain for enemies, which does create the slowing aftershocks of his Soaring Slam. We'll keep Quick Jump so that he can better launch himself into the fray, and still have an action or two left over after doing so. Rolling into 3rd level, we gain Tough to Kill, which provides us with the Die Hard feat, and then a skill increase to become an expert in athletics. We'll use Adopted Ancestry to gain access to Ratfolk feats, which will become useful when we get further down the line. Level 4 features the fabulous Flying Tackle, providing Rammus with a way into the fight that has some similarities to the launch of his Soaring Slam. Aiding him in that regard is also Powerful Leap, which extends the distance of his leaps and jumps and will thus allow him to go further with his Flying Tackle. At 5th level, he gains ability boosts that he can apply to Strength, Constitution, Wisdom, and Charisma. His armor and weapons alike increased expert proficiency, as does his survival skill. He gets Renewing Quills as a super solid option here, as that transforms his once per day Barbed Quills reaction into a once per 10 minutes use, which is still only usually once per combat, but hey, at least it can be used multiple times in a day. Still in the spirit of Soaring Slam, we select and seize Stomp Ground as our 6th level class feat, giving him a potentially damaging area effect that can disrupt the entire enemy team, or at least make them vulnerable through off guard. He'll use Titan Wrestler for his skill feat, as Rammus has no problem knocking around galaxy-sized dragons or living mountains, despite his stature as a humble armadillo. There's some standard stuff at level 7 like Reflex Expertise, But there's also reaction time, securing him an extra action each round to make use of. He also becomes a master in athletics, giving him more of a punch through punishing shove, whereas toughness as his general feat allows him to take more punches himself, simply allowing him to better serve as the tank to his talented team. Since Frenzying Taunt does affect multiple creatures around Rammus, level 8 has him use Group Taunt to affect multiple creatures with his taunt all at once. I think this is particularly handy when it comes to intercepting attack, as it allows him to move further to get into position to better protect his allies. I take Catfall as a skill feat as it increases his survivability, but it more importantly will build into a feat that fits our round and rolly roustabout in just a few short levels. Until then, level 9 has Battle Hardened, Guardian Expertise, and a skill increase that makes him a master in survival. This level lets him make use of Ratfolk Roll from the adopted ancestry that he picked up, which is an obvious reference to the roly-poly-oly of his Powerball, and even comes with damage for when he finally collides with an obstacle. Starting off level 10 is ability boost to Strength, Constitution, Wisdom, and Charisma. We have a new class feat in the form of Lockdown, which builds out of Hampering Stance and lets him stop a target from moving past him, providing him with an effect befitting his taunt. We then get a bit more flavorful with Terrain Expertise, providing him with some bonuses in the desert that he makes his home, as he roams around the vast Shuriman Desert without much apparent trouble. For his 11th level, he'll gain Unbreakable Mastery, Weapon Specialization, and then a skill increase to make him an expert in acrobatics, which will get him some better use out of Catfall. He'll use Fleet as his general feat, as Rammus is honestly rather speedy while in his Powerball, but our current version of him is slowed by the heavy armor that he favors. Fleet helps to rectify that just a bit. So, level 12 is when we could finally take Armor Break, and that does actually give him a way to turn his armor into an attack, per his Spike Shell passive. However, I'm not entirely sold on that idea. I don't think it entirely works out, so I want to suggest Armored Counterattack as an alternative. While it requires him to use Intercept Attack, it then provides him with a free strike against the triggering target, which brings to mind the Cycle of Hurt granted by his defensive Ball Curl. As for this level's skill feat, Rolling Landing builds out of his Catfall and comes with a rolling feature, which just feels like a must-have for our speedy spheroid superstar. Despite their focus on defense, Guardians keep up with other martials by gaining Weapon Mastery at 13th level, while Rammus himself will specifically take an increase in survival to become a master of it. We can use Bristle as a way to both pump up his defenses, since he doesn't use a traditional sort of shield, and give the tiniest increase to the damage of his quills, both barbed or otherwise. Spinning onto the scene at level 14 is a new feat, at least of this build, in the form of Scattering Charge. I think this could use a bit more pizzazz for a 3-action ability, but it's a great way to represent Powerball, especially when you combo it with the damage that his shoves deal from punishing shove. His skip up skill feat then is a bit less fitted for him, but it is certainly useful, and getting off of his shell and back onto his feet is a fantastically useful feature to work into his overall kit. We finally mix things up again at level 15 as Rammus gains ability boost to Strength, Dexterity, Constitution, and Wisdom. It's not a big change from his last 2 sets of ability boost, but it is something. Furthermore, Rammus becomes an unbreakable legend, as well as a legend in athletics, meaning that his shove is dealing 18 damage in addition to its typical effects, which is pretty juicy. Fast recovery as a general feat is another way to increase his survivability. The healing obviously won't come in handy during a fight, but the ability to recover from poisons even quicker should be useful from what I've observed in my own games. Armored Counterattack provides Rammus with a way to strike back at enemies that try to hit his allies, Barbed Quills lets him injure enemies that hit him, and then Clang here at level 16 means that he can punish fools that swipe at him only to critically fail such an attempt. Along with that class feat for his Sweet 16, he gains the Cloud Jump skill feat, which extends the range of his leaps and bounds, and will be useful for options such as Flying Tackle. He'll literally be able to come soaring out of the sky like a living meteorite. Our class features at level 17 garner us Greater Weapon Specialization, Unyielding Resolve, and Legendary Proficiency in the Survival skill. Quill Spray as his ancestry feat doesn't really fit any particular part of his kit, but it lets him make more out of his quills, and gives him another area option after he's knocked enemies into a good grouping to gouge. Looking at level 18, Rammus gains Quick Vengeance a little earlier than he did in our playtest build, potentially providing him with more speed or another chance to strike out at enemies. For his skill feat, Legendary Survivalist enhances his ability to survive in the desert, allowing him to endure up to incredible heat without issue, and even going without food or water for impossible periods of time. For his final class feature, Rammus gains Guardian Mastery, which is a pretty beefy effect overall, while his final skill increase makes him a legend in acrobatics, since he's been increasing that anyway. He can use robust health as his general feat, making it easier for his allies to heal him up after he's gone and taken the beating for them. To close out on our build, Rammus will take ability boost to Strength, Dexterity, Constitution, and Charisma. He'll use Boundless Reprisals for his class feat to ensure that he's always able to intercept attacks, use Clang, and still have a reaction left over for his Barbed Quills. That leaves us with Legendary Guide as his final skill feat, serving to represent some of the more heroic stories that Rammus is known for across the drifting dunes, leading the lost to lush lands. Now I assume if you're watching this video you have some intention to play Rammus, and to do so the name of the game is Lockdown. You'll want to start with Hampering Stance to make it harder for enemies to reach your allies, and then you can get into place with your choice of Scattering Charge or Flying Tackle. Which you go for might depend on how many enemies you're facing. Once you're engaged with enemies, you can use Group Taunt to discourage whole hordes of foes from attacking your companions, Lockdown to steal a single enemy in place, or Stomp Ground to bring foes low and get them gummed up around you and vulnerable for your companions. As for a free Archetype game, I had some solid suggestions last time. Monk could still enhance your unarmed attack abilities, while Stalwart Defender makes you even more of a tank. But something I hadn't considered originally is a Barbarian Dedication. This might be because honestly it feels a little strange given how even-tempered Rammus usually is, but something like Impressive Landing feels perfect for him. On the other hand, it's not something he'll be able to get until level 20, so maybe it doesn't work as well as I'd like to think. It's about time to put a wrap on this roll, so let's go ahead and review what we've put together here. Rammus the Armordillo is a quill-coat Shisk guardian with a tall-tail background, covering his disabled nature within the Shuriman Desert. The Guardian class suits the Vanguard role fantastically, letting him wade into the thick of enemies and make a mess of them. His Spike Shell is a little hard to represent with the whole adding his armor to damage, but the Guardian functioning as a full martial while also being as capable as they are with armor fits that fairly well. For the roll and speed of his Powerball, he takes the likes of Radfolk Roll and Rolling Landing, though for the damage and knockback of it, we have Scattering Charge comboing with Punishing Shove. Defensive Ball Curl is partially covered by the likes of his Ancestry's Barbed Quills and Renewing Quills, as well as the likes of Armored Counterattack and Clang. He also has Bristle as a way to increase his armor class, akin to how this enhances his armor and magic resistance. The Guardian naturally features Taunt for his frenzying taunt, while Hampering Stance and Lockdown prevent enemies from moving past him towards his allies. Finally, while he can't do the whole thing in a single round, he has Flying Tackle to get in the thick of it, per Soaring Slam, and can then follow that up with Stomp Ground to further disrupt and potentially damage enemies. As to some alternative alliteration for our adorable Armordillo, shrouded in a spiky shell, this spherical savior sails through the sands to soar and then slam into sinister suspects, sending them scattering with his sod-shaking stomps and strides. Be sure to check on the poll for our next rebuild, and then let me know what you think of this build, as well as what other sorts of builds you'd like to see in a comment. If you like what you see here and want more, be sure to leave a like and then subscribe to the channel, which is linked below along with the Twitter and Discord. Thanks for watching and have a fantastic Friday.
Okay.